Howdy folks, welcome to the overnight shift here on Travel Light Adventures. I know you've probably already seen the title of the video and that's why you clicked, so you know what it's about, but I'll go ahead and elaborate a little bit. So this video is about sleeping in your car, where you're allowed to do it, where you probably shouldn't, and where you can get away with it if you do it right. And I'll tell you a little bit about how to do that from my experience. But before we get started, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name's Nash. I'm your host here at Travel Light Adventures. Here at this channel, I focus on traveling on a budget so you can still see all the stuff that you want to see without breaking the bank. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into the video. So today's video, I'm going to talk about sleeping in your car. And I'm going to break the locations where you can do this at down into 3 different categories like I mentioned earlier: places where you can, places where you can't, and places where you may be able to. Now to simplify this a little bit, I'm going to break out the color coding system. This will be really easy for everybody to understand and maybe a little bit easier for you to remember too. So places where you're going to be allowed to do this is going to be in your green tier. Places where you may be able to do it, maybe not, talking some kind of stealth camping adventure, that's going to be your yellow tier. And places where you definitely shouldn't, that is your red tier. Now, I just want to say that all of these are subjective. These are from my experience. Other people may say different things, but this is from my personal experience, so this is what I'm going to apply here. I've slept in my car for over 100 nights at places where you're allowed to, and even more places where you may be able to get away with it. I've even gotten away with some places that you probably shouldn't. But first, we'll go ahead and kick it off with our green tier. Our green tier is going to be really easy to understand. This is places such as campgrounds or even dispersed camping, and in some states, rest stops. Though I'm not going to talk as much about those in this tier because some states in the United States have regulated sleeping in your car at rest stops, so that's going to fit into our yellow tier, even though some states do allow overnight parking at their rest stops. But green tier is pretty much the easiest to discuss. Everyone pretty much knows these because, you know, they're your campgrounds. So places where you can sleep. So that's going to be campgrounds at the state level, national park campgrounds, Forest Service campgrounds, and even dispersed camping. Now, for those of you who don't know, dispersed camping is basically camping where you can camp anywhere in public lands in the United States. I believe it extends into Canada too, but I'm not going to talk about that as much because, quite frankly, I'm not the expert and I don't want to give anybody false information. So I'm just going to stick to the United States here. So dispersed camping is camping on public land, which is Bureau of Land Management land and Forest Service land. Or the way to discern from these types of land basically are Forest Service is going to be the mountains, Bureau of Land Management is the desert. Now these lands typically are found in the western half of the United States. I'll throw the map up there just so that way y'all can see what states I'm talking about. There's going to be some in the eastern United States and in the central too, but there's not as much. But that's a discussion for another time. Just know that there's more public land the more westward you go. Also, east of the Mississippi is pretty much exclusively Forest Service land. I know in some states there are state-owned lands that you're able to camp on. I'm not as much of an expert on these because I've actually never used them, but I know that some states in the east do offer this. I would say do your own research on that, and if I do, I'll make a video about it. On the public lands for dispersed camping, you are allowed to camp in a single spot for 14 days maximum. That is across the board the rule. Now, some public lands will offer less time. I know that in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, for example, it's only 5 days, and then you have to move to a different spot. And where you have to move to depends on the designating office and also the type of land. I've been to national forests where all you have to do is move a quarter mile down the road and you're good for another 14 days. I've been to other forests where you camp in one spot, you can't return to that spot for an entire calendar year. There is a few places where you can camp for longer, though I know some of them you do have to pay. One of the most famous is Quartzsite, Arizona. I've been there. People stay down there for 6 months out of the year during the winter time. I would not want to stay down there during the summertime, but the wintertime, fantastic. But I digress. So just know public lands, it's going to vary by which type of land, the designating office, what your rules are. But just know generally the maximum across the board is 14 days. And a lot of that applies to public land campgrounds as well and recreation areas which are Forest Service, BLM, and also national parks. So it pretty much applies to those too. Because this video is just about where you can and where you can't sleep in your car, I'll go a little bit more in depth about how to find these dispersed campsites in another video, but just know that it's super easy and you can do it with just about any vehicle as long as you're not going too far off the road. So that is your green tier, is your public lands and your designated campgrounds. That's where you're allowed to be at. Next is going to be our yellow tier, which is places where you can do it, you may be able to get away with it, or it varies by which place you're doing it at. This one's going to be a lot more in depth because there's a lot more stuff here, and I have a lot more experience here. For your yellow tier, which is places that you may be able to get away with it at, this is going to involve a whole host of places. This is going to be rest stops, truck stops, Walmarts, even hotels, all that fun stuff, places where you might be able to get away with it. Now, the ones that I had the most experience with are going to be your truck stops and your Walmarts. Those are places where you may be able to get away with it. I've stayed at truck stops more than Walmarts, and what I can tell you is that the truck stops that I have stayed at never ever had an issue. Now, here in the United States, we have 3 main chains of truck stops that are going to offer places where you can overnight park, where you can usually stay there. And that's going to be Love's, Pilot Flying J, and Travel America, or TA Travel Center, as you're probably going to see it. These 3 truck stops, these are the most common here in the United States, and they're the ones that I've had the best experience with offering overnight parking, and most of them do. Some of them don't, and the one that I've had the experience with the most that doesn't offer it is going to be Love's, which are generally the safest and the best quality. So I can understand why they wouldn't offer it. Now, one thing I want to hit on before I go any further is anywhere in this yellow tier that's going to offer overnight parking that you may be able to get away with, it is a courtesy, it's not really even a service, but it is a courtesy of these places to do. So make sure that you, 1, don't take advantage of it, 2, be respectful of others, and 3, which kind of falls under 2, just be clean and be in and out. Don't make it your own personal campsite. Be courteous, be respectful, and stay self-contained. Don't stay for more than 1 night unless you really, really have to. When you come to a truck stop, you're going to generally see 2 areas of the truck stop. There's going to be an area for normal cars, and there's going to be an area for trucks. If you are in a car, an SUV, or a van, or anything other than a truck, please do not go in the area that is for the trucks. They are working. That is not an area that we want to go. If you don't want to take spots away from those truckers, they're working, they need those spots. Please don't take spots away from them. And also be respectful of any signage that's posted, or if anyone tells you to leave, make sure that you leave in a timely manner. The next option here is Walmart stores. Now, these I've stayed at a few times, and this is how I do it in terms of Walmart stores. I never ask. I've asked in the past. I would rather ask for forgiveness than for permission. Not so much because the answer is going to be no, but because 9 times out of 10, you can either find somewhere else to park at, or you can judge if you can sleep there or not by what's going on in the parking lot. I just go up and I pull up and I see, okay, is there rigs in the parking lot? Okay, I can stay here. I will always try and park far away from the store, as far away as possible. This increases not only the darkness, but also the further you get away from the store, the less the store is going to care about you being there, and the more chance you have of getting away with it. So I will park away from the store. If there's other rigs at the store, I will park close to them, but not right up on them. Because I'm camping in a sedan, most people are not going to assume that I'm sleeping in my car. I want to make it obvious. If I sleep near rigs, that's going to make it a little more obvious. I don't want to make it obvious. If you're staying in Walmart, same rules apply. If there's no overnight parking signs, move along, find another spot. Now, the third option here is hotels. Now, I have stayed at this one the least. I've only stayed in hotel parking lots a few times, and it's an option, but it's not one that I like to use. Most hotels nowadays are really big on security because in today's world you have to be. So 90% of hotels out there, you're going to need a parking pass or they get your license plate, and they do send someone around those parking lots. So hotels I use the least. You can use them, and generally from what I've seen, you can get away with them as long as you do it the right way. Same things I mentioned, be self-contained, be respectful, and don't let anybody know you're sleeping there. Don't make it obvious, because if you make it obvious that you're sleeping somewhere, you're not only vulnerable to getting the knock, you're going to be incapacitated somewhere where there's other people for X amount of hours. It's a good idea to not let people know that you're there in your car because anything could happen and you could be defenseless if they're already on you. Next up here in the yellow tier is going to be rest stops. Now, these are similar to truck stops because you generally can sleep there. Rest stops are sometimes more designed for people to sleep in their cars there. And 9 times out of 10, you can get away with them just fine. Like I mentioned earlier, the only reason they're in the yellow tier is because some states have cracked down on sleeping in your car. I know Tennessee and Colorado are big ones that have put time limits. And Tennessee, I believe, has even made it illegal to sleep in your vehicle. So, okay, Tennessee. Most of the time, you can sleep at rest stops, though. That's what they're there for. They're there for you to rest. And for these ones, just like truck stops, they're going to be separated for the most part between trucks and regular vehicles. If you're in a regular vehicle, just go to the side that allows regular vehicles. I try to avoid rest stops because there's a lot less traffic there. And for me, if I'm in an area, I believe in safety in less numbers. But if I'm going to have to be somewhere where there's a lot more variables, like I've mentioned, I like there to be traffic around because that's a lot more people that could notice something going on. So rest stops don't necessarily have that, especially in the middle of the night. So if being out in the middle of nowhere like that makes you nervous, I would avoid them. But rest stops, generally a just fine place to sleep. Now this fourth option here, I've only had to use one time, and in all honesty, I would put this one in the green tier if it weren't for different cities having different overnight parking rules, because this one, in all honesty, is foolproof. You can't go wrong with this one. So the fourth option is going to be bars and breweries. You can usually get away with these if a city allows overnight parking, because if there's a car in the bar parking lot, nobody's going to ask any questions because someone's just gotten a ride home. This is one that I've seen not a whole lot out there, maybe because it's a secret, or maybe it's just because it's not used a whole lot. But I've had to use this one time, and in all honesty, to me, it sounds foolproof. Now, one thing I will say about it is, like I mentioned, make sure you check a city's overnight parking rules. Some cities have ordinances against overnight parking, and you may get a ticket, you may get towed. So make sure you're up to date with those before you decide to crash in a bar parking lot. Any of these places that are, going to be close to cities or wherever, because most of them are, make sure you do your research about safety. I would generally not recommend staying in dangerous areas or areas with high crime, especially vehicle crime, because you're a prime target if you're in a car and you're also incapacitated. Even if you are stealth, you're still a prime target if you're in a vehicle in an area with high vehicle crime. Also, trust your gut. Even because a place says it's safe, it could be the safest place in the United States. If your gut's telling you don't stay there, don't stay there. I've done that before. I've gotten up and left places because my gut told me to get away. Now this last one I'm going to mention here is really kind of between the yellow and the red tier, just because you can kind of get away with it, you kind of can't. It just depends on the area. And so that's going to be in cities, places where there's either a lot of street parking in neighborhoods and such. So I've done this and I've gotten away with it. If you are just starting out this kind of thing, I would leave this until you have a little bit more experience. Start out at the truck stops, the Walmart stores, the dispersed camping, and once you've kind of got a feel for how places feel, then you can start expanding into cities. When I started sleeping in my car, I didn't stealth camp in a city for the first time until about 3 years after the fact. Thanks, Denver. And even then, I was still kind of nervous. Make sure you do a lot of research before you do that. But if you are going to, I would say places that you could get away with it at are going to be places with a lot of street parking in large cities. So usually close to parks. Apartment complexes usually work, though what I will say is if you're in an apartment complex, don't park inside the parking lot, park on the street. I know that I used to live in an apartment complex. I saw people stealth camp there all the time. I saw a really cool Westphalia one time, but that's a story for another time. So if you've got to do it, that's going to be a good spot. Really, unless you make yourself known in a city, nobody's really going to ask any questions. Make sure you do this inner city if you're going to do it. I would avoid the suburbs because people in the suburbs are going to be a lot more in tune with who's around them versus in the city. Also, another option that you can use is industrial areas. I can't speak to this a whole lot because I've never done that before. I've never camped in an industrial area or slept in my car. I've seen people say they heard good things. It's quiet. I've never done it. I can't speak to it. Right, now for your red tier, this is going to be places where you probably shouldn't or definitely shouldn't. These are going to be hospitals, churches, and casinos. Those are the main ones that I'm going to hit on. So first one, casinos. Casinos have a lot of security. I would not want to stay there because if you're not spending money at that casino, you're going to get the knock. The casinos have cameras on everywhere on the property, all times, and someone is always watching them. If you are not spending money at their establishment, they're going to kick you out, even if you're in their parking lot taking a snooze. If you're not making the money by spending money, you're not going to be welcome there. Hospitals, I would not stay at, and this is not so much of a can you get away with it, can you not thing. You probably can get away with it. I just think it's in bad taste to stay at a hospital. Churches are kind of the same thing. I would say if you're going to stay at a church in their parking lot, that's one instance where I would say ask for permission rather than don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. I would say call them. If you have to stay there, give them your situation. If somebody answers, just say, look, I'm tired. I just want somewhere to sleep. They may let you sleep. They may not. Just be respectful. I see that get posted around a little bit. I would just not consider that a valid option. I know I mentioned about stealth and staying in places in that yellow tier. And there's a few tips that I'll give you, a few tips that I use to help you be more stealthy. And I'll go in more depth about it in a future video. Good ways to do that are arrive late, well after dark. I know this is a little bit harder to do in the summer months, but in the winter, it's a lot easier. But either way, arrive well after dark. 2, park away from the establishment if you can. Not only is this going to make you seem less obvious, there's going to be less traffic the further away from the establishment that you get, and it's also going to be quieter and probably darker. So it's going to be easier for you and easier for them too. Reduce the amount of light that you're putting out. So whether you're using window covers or whatever, reduce the amount of light that you're having on in your vehicle. And also, once you get to wherever you're sleeping, be ready to sleep. Me personally, I will stop somewhere before I go to the place that I'm going to sleep at. I'm going to get ready for sleep. I'm going to brush my teeth, do all that fun stuff. Then once I'm ready for sleep, I'm going to go to the place that I'm stealth camping at. That way I can be in my bed. That's one of my top tips to being stealth. And also, be out quickly. Don't make yourself obvious. I know that once the morning comes around, you've already done the deed, whatever. Technically, if a place has suspicion that you slept in your car there and you're not supposed to, they technically can still call the police on you and you technically can still be charged. So just be in and out quickly, be in late, be out early. Those are my stealth tips for you, and I'll go more in depth about those in a future video. But anyways, that's gonna pretty much do it for places that you can stay at in this video. If I can think of any more, I'll make an addendum to this video. And if you've got anything that you wanna add, put it down there in the comments. But anyway, thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, maybe consider a like, consider subscribing. They are both free. Would appreciate it. But anyways, thank you for watching. Thank you for checking out my channel, and I'll see you next time.